Welcome to the Beachwood Business Compass podcast. I'm Kathy Biederman, Economic Development Director here for the City of Beachwood. Our mission here is simple: to connect local businesses with the tools, insights, and opportunities that they need to continue to grow here within the community. By sharing success stories, offering expert advice, spotlighting community resources, we aim to empower Beachwood businesses to overcome challenges and unlock new possibilities. Today, we will be talking with Nate Ward. Nate is Director of the Global Business Center at the SBDC Export Assistance Network. He has extensive international experience with manufacturing and the banking industries. His intentional business expertise includes sales, logistics, marketing, pricing, research, and product development. In addition to his diverse cultural knowledge, Nate speaks multiple languages, including French, Spanish, and Japanese. Services of the Export Assistance Network are primarily provided within 9 counties surrounding the Cleveland-Akron area. However, they assist many companies with exporting and international trade while working in collaboration with the U.S. Commercial Services and providing access to resources that are here at Cleveland State. Nate, I'm so glad you're joining me. We've had a few other guests here on the podcast, as we were talking earlier today, that have brought up your name in context. We spoke with Katie Van Dyke from the SBDC, as well as Nikki Salandri and Don Lawson. Nikki representing the Collaborative Chambers of Commerce.
Oh, yeah.
And Don Lawson representing the British American Chamber. And we've had some really interesting dialogue revolving around export assistance and working with companies in an international capacity. And one of the things that I think is, a big question out there is what are some of the changing factors today that are really influencing business? And you're hearing from businesses on a regular and consistent basis. You've had some surveys that have been represented here within the area. What are you hearing from businesses related to their interests in import and export assistance these days?
That's a great question to start off. So thanks, Kathy, for the invitation to be on this podcast. I've been looking forward to this. I think it's a really important topic. It's been a hot topic. I've been doing this, since 2012. And prior to that, I was in private sector and I worked mostly in manufacturing, but also had a stopover in banking. It's a bit funny how the challenges and the themes have ebbed and flowed. When I first came on board, the big thing was BRICS. Everyone wanted to talk about China. They wanted to talk about Russia and Brazil as places where they were eyeing the opportunities. They were eyeing markets for expansion. And then that has kind of gone away. And these days, when we talk about those countries, it's more like, how are we going to deal with them from like maybe an adversarial standpoint, or it's shifted away from development from those countries. And of course, this year was the single year that I think there's been the most upheaval, non-COVID related upheaval, I should say, because of, the changing tariffs landscape. And that has put a lot of our companies, I think, in some difficult spots.
Yeah.
It
kind of varies a little bit, right? I mean, some companies are making their way through, and then others have been impacted by those tariffs.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's difficult in the negative sense, but also in the positive sense. So this is not only the conversations that I'm having with companies, but there was a recent survey that was put out by our friends at Magnet, who works with, I think, a huge overlap between the companies they serve, the companies we serve. It's mostly small to mid-sized manufacturers who we're talking about, but not just them. I mean, we also serve the individual small outfits that are importer-exporter companies. An individual that has just maybe moved here from, let's say, Morocco and says, hey, I'd really love to be able to import some, Moroccan goods, some spices here, and it seems like there's a demand for it. That ends up being a minority of our clients, but still a pretty consistent flow. Most of those requests have really fallen to the wayside recently. We haven't heard so much from those individuals. But what, the survey from Magnet, and this really mirrors, I think, the conversations we're having with a lot of our clients, is that the change in the landscape has put companies in one of two camps. If they were really diversified in terms of their global trade, meaning they had high integration with importing components, importing various aspects to whatever they're making or doing, and then also, selling internationally, but more so on the first half. There's been a lot of juggling that's happened. It seems that almost every country was impacted in terms of their goods coming to our country, and so this has meant dealing with cost increases. So either they've had to stop or slow down or reduce or change what they were buying or where it was coming from, and just finding new ways of dealing with where those cost increases were coming from. There is another group of companies, though, which are based here domestically, and a surprising number of our companies, Cuyahoga County represents about 10% of all manufacturers are based in Cuyahoga County, which is a fact I recently discovered. I didn't realize that. But, for those that are here, there's all of a sudden caused by, the first wave I was talking about, that there are now companies that are looking for U.S. suppliers. They're looking for companies that can provide them a widget of some kind. And so this other group of companies is now seeing an influx of new business. I mean, one of my clients said they had an account that went away 10 years ago. And this was, they had big buyers that switched their suppliers overseas. And now all of a sudden they're getting their, inquiries again from this old customer because they're trying to avoid the tariff impact, and they're seeking out domestic buyers. So either way, the companies are seeing changes in their customer base, their supply chain, and where companies fall in that continuum, I think, has really defined how this year is shaping for them, and it's really put the companies, I think, in those two different camps.
And it is interesting because Ohio is really a major component of having that supply side for companies across the nation, and we've got a lot of interconnectivity there. And I can see from a small business aspect, if you had been doing a lot of international business, that there's the need to continue to look more locally. But I also think it's a prime time for companies that maybe haven't done any type of global or international business to really consider some of the opportunities that may be there in the future. When you have these changing factors that are taking place, sometimes it's an opportunity to really take another strategic look at your business and how that business can position itself then going into the future. And you have a robust amount of programs and even some activities and events that come up that can help businesses kind of dive into what some of those considerations are that they can start making. Could you talk a little bit about some of the programs? Because it's really like A to Z. You kind of take them from just, I have an idea and I may want to tap into this country, to really exploring, strategizing, setting direction, and then even helping with the final implementation of that plan then going forward.
Sure thing. Yeah, no question. I think that's a great point. In our world, when it comes to international trade, we're always trying to preach the long term. If it means business development, landing a new contract, or if you're looking on the supply chain side, you're trying to import goods. Very often, this is a process that could take months, if not years, to come to fruition. So we encourage the companies we talk to think in those terms. That maybe, of course, the things are going to happen like a one-off deal or an opportunity comes up. Someone's really eager to kind of get going. But if it's going to be a long-term thing, there's going to be some due diligence that's involved. It's building relationships that we preach as being really key to having sustainable, ongoing, to make it all worthwhile. There are a lot of things. There's disruption that's happening right now, but that has presented opportunities. The dollar is really low right now compared to most other world currencies. There are, the part that we're kind of overlooking in all the tariff negotiations is that our country has been able to negotiate lower tariffs in a lot of other important markets. And so U.S.-made goods are suddenly a lot more competitive in those places. And so these are the kind of things that we're trying to make sure our companies understand and are poised to take advantage of when the time is right. And to your point, a lot of the programs that we offer are trying to instill in companies that what is going to be the 1 year, 2 year, 3 year, and maybe longer outlook. The biggest thing behind this is, so I'm actually housed at CSU at Cleveland State University, and I joined the program in 2012 because I'd found one of their services. At that time, I was working for a manufacturer on the West Side, and I was at a company, and I was in my cubicle, and I was getting inquiries, and I was kind of like beating my head against a wall, wondering like, why are these things? There were like documents that were being requested. There were these procedures. There was currency and things like that. And I kind of said, there's got to be a better way, or someone else has got to understand what it takes to kind of, what is the right response to a lot of these things that were coming up. And my boss at the time recommended, hey, there's this thing happening at Cleveland State. It's called Global Target. it's kind of a forum where you can talk to other area companies that do international trade, and you can ask them these questions, and they'll tell you because, our company was a mid-sized company. We had limited number of folks under our roof that contended with these things. So I went there. I met this guy named Nick Lubar. So he worked at SwageLock, and he kind of became my mentor. I saw Nick Lubar last week. He's terrific. And he said, at SwageLock, we encountered that same problem, Nate, and this is how we've handled it. Or, we used a third-party person we outsourced this, it was a documentation thing, something I had been dealing with. It was for letters of credit. And that thing alone, within 1 year, had more than paid for we probably saved us $10,000 in just doing that small move because we were getting dinged with all kinds of penalties. So anyway, to get to your questions, this Global Target Program, I'm now in charge of it.
Yes.
I've run it. We just celebrated our 20th anniversary.
Congratulations.
And it is, thank you. It's this, it's a unique program where we do let area companies talk to other companies, learn from them, get mentored by them, and then we couple that with state and federal services that are designed for these small and mid-sized companies to help them make the most of international markets. So if I can, I'd like to give you just one local example. Yeah. So there's a company that went through our program for the first time last year. Their name is Noramar. So they are based on Mercantile Boulevard. I've known them for multiple years. I've been trying to get them in the program. And in short, this is a husband and wife owned company. Scott and Catherine Marsh are the owners of the company. Catherine's father started it. It's a relatively small outfit. I mean, their specialization is they make a type of instrument that analyzes the salt content in foods that are produced in food manufacturing locations. So think of, a saltine place, Nabisco factory, let's say. So every one of those, like the salt, has got to be specifically measured. So they have this unique instrument that will do that. And they sell this instrument to food companies all around the world. But for a small company like them, they have limited bandwidth to know all the answers. And the biggest thing that they had is they went through the process of creating a new edition of their product, the first, second generation. It took them several years to build it from the ground up. And they said, we have a huge opportunity. We're going to roll this out, and we think that we're going to get flooded with all kinds of interest for people to renew, purchase, enter new markets. We had them join the our process last year, and they said it was the exact right time. We were able to pair them up with two people who had vast experience in a couple of markets that they were targeting in particular, and it so happened that they were also dealing with kind of an expiring contract. They had a distributor in Europe that was an elderly gentleman who was kind of in failing health and couldn't maintain doing it anymore. So they had to figure out, who's going to carry this for us and who's going to be our distributor. And over the course of last year, we actually set them up with two new distributors. They have a distributor in the UK and they have one in Ireland.
Very
and
nice.
This has been, I think, for a company like them, husband and wife team with very few other employees around, were able to confidently step through that process, get a replacement person, and then have a plan for how they were going to distribute this new product of theirs. They've been one of our success stories, and we'd like to see more of those type of companies approach us.
Absolutely. That's fantastic because it's overwhelming for a company to be able to try to figure out even what the first step is to trying to make that progress. And I know even in some of the programs and services that you're offering, you're able to take it down to the minute elements of how to then market that product overseas, correct? There's some grant opportunities even there for companies that want to, continue to bring their product overseas and really identify that market, do the research through your organization, and then continue to divest in how they can find other opportunities to be able to carry that into true market opportunities in varying other countries.
Yeah, absolutely. So going back to Scott's case, I mean, the first thing we did was we helped diagnose what markets make the most sense for him. That's probably the most time-intensive thing that we find that small and mid-sized companies just don't know where to start with. Like if they're trying to juggle, maybe we're going to go to Hong Kong and then Nigeria, and we got a phone call from England. And I mean, for a company that has, a couple dozen employees, that could be like a a tall order and they quickly burn out. They say,
and you don't know what your competition is in those markets.
Yeah.
You have no idea what you're facing, from an import-export standpoint.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. I mean, the competitive landscape, and am I even allowed to sell to these places? Is there a reason, some regulation I've never heard of that kind of prohibits it? So, we are there to be those people that kind of clear that all up for you. And this very first step is we'll say, all right, these are the markets that are best aligned with you for, the desirable of your product, for what it's made to do, for whatever regulation standards, all that kind of stuff. And it's different in every case. Like for every company is different, how big they are, what their resources are. And then we'll say, okay, let's simplify things for you. These are the top 3 countries that make the most sense for you. And we've done a lot of these. I mean, in my 13 years of doing this, I don't know, we've done like 100 of these. So, I think we've kind of got the science down of how these, we track them. We track the effectiveness of this and did they follow through? And in his case, all right, it was obviously a very burning situation in the UK. He needed to replace so-and-so. This is the obvious place of attention. So, but the problem was that when the relationship started with the UK, that was before Brexit happened. And since that time, they developed a whole bunch of clients in the European Union. And so we suggested maybe there's another country that would also make sense. And so we recommended Ireland. Ireland's a very business-friendly place. And so that's why when he was going to go over there, he hadn't been in a while, but he had lots of questions about it was actually Nick, who I mentioned before from SwageLock. He's one of our mentors. Yeah. He was also on this team. And Scott had questions of like, well, what do I say in terms of pricing? And, what about a contract? Would it be different? And a lot of these accounts he had inherited from his father-in-law. So, it was like the nitty-gritty questions that we were able to provide him and gave him just the confidence that he didn't have to wing this. He didn't have to Google it. And he had other people who had been through these things before and could offer him some guidance and made him put him in a much stronger position. That's
fantastic. And how many companies do you have in the current program under the Global Trade Program today?
Yeah. So for Global Target, last year, our cohort was 8.
Okay. So it's a nice small group, but it's an intimate group that you have the opportunity to really kind of, bring those challenges that you're facing and work them through within that cohort.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, we want it to be something that is, it's not like a classroom. It's an open discussion, and we really try to mold it so that it speaks to the questions that most of the companies in the room have. And then each one of them gets assigned a specific team, a support team that's going to work with them for the program runs 7 months. And we really try to take a deep dive on like, okay, what's going on with them? What's the problem? What's the opportunity? What can we help them with? So that by the end of the program, it's not just some kind of rubber stamp certificate, but we'll say like at the outset, we've identified these goals or these problems that we were going to focus all of our attention around to help them move the peg forward. And then our last session is just a report out. All the companies, they all get to know one another. We had a couple of companies that made friends with each other. Because this, I don't know, when it comes to international stuff, people have a way of opening up. And there are so many learning lessons that even when companies come from very different industries, there's so many similarities. They're all dealing with the same customers. You're dealing with the same, it's currency, it's time zone, it's culture, all those kind of things that it doesn't matter if you sell, I say, potato chips or microchips. Like there's a lot of commonalities that the companies can exchange with one another.
And I think one of the big questions that companies always have, because you're going into a new market area, you're looking closely at how much you're investing into, tapping into this new market. Are there other support mechanisms that are there from a state and federal level when it comes to financing, perhaps, that total venture into that? And is that something, if they are looking for those kind of financial mechanisms to be able to support their investment into this new market area, is that something that you can assist them with?
Well, yes and no. So you're right that the prospect of getting into a foreign market can be a bit expensive. There's the simple cost of like getting to a market or exhibiting at a trade show. Before we get to the point of like a company setting up an office in another market, that happens kind of rarely among the types of companies. Mostly we're just talking about companies that, they've done a couple of business deals with Canada and we're just trying to encourage them like, oh, maybe it's time for you to go visit them, or maybe it's time to exhibit at a show in that country or the Caribbean or wherever it might be. So for many years, for the last 13 years, there has been something called the State Trade Promotion Grant, which is called the STEP Grant. That's come from the U.S. Small Business Administration. So the state of Ohio administers this as the IMAGE grant, the International Market Access Grant for Exporters. So if our listeners have heard of it in either one of those two, that's what we would call that, the IMAGE STEP grant. The catch with that is currently we've received notice that this is going to be sunset. And so funding of this is likely to go away. I mean, nothing's set in stone.
Yeah.
We're talking here, there's still not even a full budget that's been approved by Congress, I know. So we're hoping that this gets an extension. The state of Ohio still does have funding, and we are still granting applications for $10,000. So this is what we're talking about in Ohio. So if a company were to, let's say, take their team to a foreign trade show in Milan, they, in theory, might be able to get $10,000 back on that cost, and that can make the difference between companies doing it and not doing it. So it's it's a meaningful chunk of change.
Yeah, and then sometimes there's even other opportunities through our regional economic development partners to be able to connect and find opportunities to connect if they're overseas in one of these trade show opportunities. Just being there and present, gives you the opportunity to network with like-minded individuals here from the Northeast Ohio or the state of Ohio region. And overall, where do you see the first step being for people who may be interested in connecting with your office? What are some of the initial steps that companies should take? Do you have some webinars that you're doing or some other opportunities for them to engage?
Yeah, absolutely. So, I mean, the first thing I'd say is if they want to just call us, write us, whatever, it's we're always happy. There's multiple people on my staff, and we're always happy to take a phone call or visit companies. We love visiting companies. And I should say that, our territory has expanded. So it started off as 9, but we're actually over 30 counties right now.
Okay.
So we're responsible for most of central North Ohio, Northwest Ohio, and the greater Cleveland area. But, that being said, most of our activity is concentrated around Cuyahoga County. And we have quite a lot of companies that we serve here in the east side of Cleveland. So, we do have a couple programs that are announced for 2026. So in January, we do have the start of our Global Target Program. So we are still entertaining applications for that. So it will begin on January 16th. On January 29th, we have a crossover webinar. We're doing a 2-part series with our cousins called the Apex Accelerator.
Oh, yes.
So if you know them, they do government contracting.
Absolutely.
So we're featuring a 2-part. It's just an intro on how do you get started in government contracting, how would you get started in international trade. And that's going to be followed up on February 12th, where we're going to be talking about an Ohio program called CyberSecure. So there's a free service for Ohio companies to beef up their internet security, their cybersecurity, that's run by the Apex Accelerator, and which actually got piloted at CSU during the pandemic. I was part of that team, and it was so successful they spun it off into a statewide program. And then we're also going to be talking about U.S. government regulations for selling abroad. So there are a set of laws that kind of oversee if you're doing military technology or defense-related articles and others. There's a set of U.S. laws that we want to make sure companies understand. So it's kind of a natural pairing for that audience.
That's fantastic. And then your website again?
So CSUSBDC.com is probably the fastest way for people to go to. Yeah, and you can
just interconnect with the Ohio Export Assistance
the Cleveland State University Small Business Development Center, so CSUSBDC.com. And so they'll see, the programs that are run by my counterpart, Katie Van Dyke at the Small Business Development Center. But there's a global tab, and you could click on that, and it'll show you all the stuff that we have going on.
Wonderful. Well, I appreciate so much the conversation. I appreciate you sharing some of the information that you have relative to the services that are available, because ultimately here within the Beachwood area, we have a growing number of entrepreneurs. I think there's a lot of opportunity for interconnection with our area companies and with the services and products that you have to offer. And look forward to continuing to work with you in many regards, here within the community going forward. Anything else you'd like to share?
I do also want to share one thing I didn't have a chance to talk a little bit about is an internship program that we're also a part of. So something called the Ohio Export Internship Program.
Yes, that's a fantastic program.
It is fantastic. And it's especially fantastic for small and mid-sized companies because it's one where we have a really deep competitive pool of students that come from a variety of universities. So I'm actually part of 2 cohorts. There's one at Bowling Green in the Northwest, but CSU is the one I'm most closely affiliated with. And this year, for example, we had over 100 students apply for it, and we accepted 13, I think. And we really were able to get the cream of the crop students. And the biggest thing we're looking for are students that have a high degree of motivation. They can be taught. There's a 3.0 minimum GPA average. And I think what this program is really great is aligning those students with area companies. It's a matchmaker program. So Scott's company was aligned with a student. And I'll never forget, because in the application process, we asked him, what would be something that would be a really valuable thing for an intern? And he said, if that student knows anything about titration processes. And I said, I don't know what that is, but okay, I'll write that down. And believe it or not, there was a student in our applicant pool. Her name was Samantha Gaba. And she talked about how her father was a chemist and he did something with like titration. But she said that word. And I said, oh my gosh, stop everything. This is amazing. And I think after the interview was over, I called Scott and I said, you'll never guess, I think I found your student. And sure enough, we placed Samantha to work at his company last year. And it was the first intern they ever had. It was,
that's incredible. And the amount of knowledge these kids come with these days to be able to really interface and kind of take the company to a point where they can do their own research in-house to be able to probably move that product along.
For him, it was a number of things. It was having a high quality person who, there was a whole class, like we train the students, there's a job readiness thing we put them through. They're very polished. And so when they get placed in the company, the state also contributes 50% of the wage that the company would pay them. So it makes it you're getting a very affordable person who has been matched to your company for the skill set you're looking for. And it's probably not not the type of worker who ever would have heard of your company before. So Scott and his wife aren't doing job fairs. They're not going out recruiting. They're hiring people who's like maybe the neighbor's kid or something. But so Samantha didn't end up staying with them. So she had to go back to school and eventually got a really good job at PNC, which I know she's happy about. But Scott said he's eager to have another intern this year. And he's also looking to hire someone based in part on some of the work that Samantha was able to do and extra bandwidth and with all this new work that's coming. So if there are companies out there who are, I think, could use an extra set of hands, if there's projects that have been collecting dust but need someone to kind of tackle, international trade related or not, we could kind of have that discussion. But the state, I think statewide, we have about 55 students that we're looking to place in our companies. And I think that's probably one of the under the radar things that most companies don't know they have access to. We'd love nothing more than have that conversation.
And I'm so glad you brought that up, because I know from my office perspective, we use interns every summer. And you're spot on right. Those projects that you've really wanted to dive into, and the students are so quick, in terms of pulling information together, analyzing that information, and then providing you, good, meaningful information that you can then carry forward for the implementation of whatever you may be looking to just move along.
I mean, it could be information. It could be more than that. We've had companies that said, hey, as one of our companies said, we have a lot of interest coming in the Southeast. Like, great. Would you like a student that speaks Thai or, is from the Philippines? And, so oftentimes, we may be able to kind of plug a competency that would be really advantageous. There was a company not so far away from here that said, we'd love to have an engineering student. It's not an engineering program, but it so happened that one of our students had switched majors. So started off as a chemical engineer, but then decided that she wanted to become a marketing major. Well, guess what? So she's still working. That was like 3 years ago, but she's working there. It's a company full of engineers. She runs the marketing program. And, it was such a great blend between her competencies and the company. Also, it's small out there in Hudson, but they sell to like 30, 40 countries around the world, and couldn't have thought of a better fit.
Very nice. Well, I am excited to continue to our discussions going forward. Love to integrate you with some of the businesses that are here within the Beachwood community, and hopefully we can find some more projects to be kind of cornerstone projects for the Export Assistance Network program. So
absolutely,
appreciate you being here today, Nate, and thank you for listening to the Beachwood Business Compass podcast. We have more episodes coming up in the coming years, so we look forward to you subscribing and continuing to listen here on the network for the city of Beachwood. Thank you.